Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now Photon's full deep dive is out, and as always we're going to be breaking it down with my kind of impressions of it and so on and so forth. Now obviously, just like with Vox, we already had the leaked abilities, but whenever these abilities do get leaked, we're missing some very important numbers, and also we cannot fully get a feel for the champion rotations. But ever since I read the abilities, I was very interested and hopeful for Photon, and full disclosure, Science is my favorite class, and I typically do like Science champions. But I do actually have very high hopes specifically for Photon, perhaps even higher than I initially had for like Cassie Lang, definitely higher than I had for Sandman, for instance. Because she seems to be like exactly the type of Science champion that is needed in the class. And the type of champion that we have been starting to get in Science class, as in a very aggressive, fast-paced aggro champion that's possibly, hopefully, will have plenty of damage in her kit. And if I have to summarize Photon as a champion, she's effectively science version of CMM that's updated and made better. One of the biggest downsides from Captain Marvel movie is the fact that without Nick Fury synergy, it's incredibly hard to remain in your binary form, and it kind of jitters your playstyle because you feel like you have to spam heavy attacks at all times and you cannot be properly aggressive. And Photon, I think, has kind of solved that problem. So, some of the coolest mechanics that I love about Photon as well is that Untouchable on level 2, and also Untouchable when stunned. That is primarily going to be a defensive ability, and she will actually possess quite a lot of defensive problems unless you will have quite an appropriate counter. Because that is one of the first things that I noticed. With her having special attacks that cannot be dexed and are unblockable, like on level 1, unless you parry, basically. And there's nothing you can do to stop her from entering that binary form or light form or whatever it's called in this case. Means that unless you are very comfortable at fighting against Photon, there will be a lot of people who struggle a lot. Also, the fact that you cannot parry and attack her will definitely cause even more problems. You can parry and hit her if you have a miss bypass mechanic, but other than that, no dice. On the bright side, the fact that she will be inflicting debuffs as a defender to you as you are hitting her will supercharge a ton of skilled champions like Kingpin, like Baron Zemo, and a whole bunch of others, which is something that I really like. Like Crossbones and Kingpin and a whole bunch of other champs will probably absolutely run through her like she doesn't exist, because you will be getting a ton of debuffs as you are striking Photon. Another kind of like major change is obviously Science version of CMM doesn't have buffs. All of those effects are passives, and a lot of stuff depends on her debuffs, which is as per course to the Science class. Her base core mechanic, that will be showed later, is exactly the same as CMM, basically. You build up your charges, you enter your mega damage, super awesome special Power Ranger form, and you get 5 Furies, just like CMM would get 5 Fury buffs, she gets 5 Fury passives. And then you try to maintain your light form for as long as possible and do as much damage as possible. You build up your charges basically by inflicting debuffs on opponent. You do that with your mediums, with your lights, with your heavy attacks. And once you reach 25, you enter that form, or after 10 or 15, I believe, you can dash back and hold block just like CMM. So there are definitely lots of similarities with Captain Marvel movie. The inverse of Captain Marvel movie is experienced also here, that she is a bleed immune Science champion. And I like that a lot because there are not a lot of Science champions in game that are bleed immune. If you're going to take a quick look at Science class at large, we can see that bleed immunity as such, we only have on Sandman, Luke Cage, and The Thing, I believe. So that is a very rare immunity for Science class, and I approve of that. Also, Power Steal is nice. Would be better probably if it was Power Drain, but still, again, that mechanic that Photon can trigger parry mastery against non-contact attacks. This can definitely be useful, dealing with like Shuris and Dominos, possibly. Well, doubtfully Dominos, but Shuris and Ebony Maws and champions alike. And also, whenever opponents inflicted with a debuff, Photon inflicts a non-stacking 80% Petrify passive for 5 seconds. I don't quite like that. I think it's too short. I don't think you will be able to make very big use out of the Petrify. I hope I'm wrong, but it does seem that it is quite short duration, nothing that you can properly rely on. So it's kind of like a very small version of Petrify. It's good that it's there because you will be periodically able to mitigate opponents' power gain effects or stuff like that, but I don't think it's going to be as powerful as I have hoped it to be. Also, if the opponent has Willpower Mastery active, it is removed with that Petrified. That is quite cool. I like that. And again, that top mechanic that we can barely see there is when stunned, Photon loses control of her solid form and gains Untouchable passive for 2.5 seconds. Basically, she starts phasing. So yeah, you will not be able to parry and hit her. So we can see that here with Dr. Doom, for instance. It works also on passive stuns, which I do quite like. But it's also definitely going to make her harder as a defender. Combined with her special attacks and her debuffs. And if you're running Inequity Mastery, reduction in your damage, I do think she can be a very annoying defender unless you have a proper skill counter. That would be my kind of conclusion. That is also without knowing her full stats, base health, and stuff like that. Hopefully she's not completely deprived in the stat department. Right. So we did see this part of the abilities. All of her attacks are energy. So that's just, a different status effect. It's going to be useful in some cases. It's going to be bad in others. But we do not have many or any science champions in the game that have all attacks as energy damage. So that will enable her to take some unique matchups, in my opinion, which is quite cool. It would be cooler if many of her attacks would be non-contact, just like Shuri, but we can't get everything. Right. Additionally, her medium attacks cannot miss, and when she's in her Mega Light form, I believe all of her attacks cannot miss, so she will function as a very solid miss counter as well, in my opinion, which is always welcome and encouraged in the game. Here we can see that she fails miss mechanic very easily with just, at any point, just medium attacks cannot miss, period. This is also going to make her harder to fight against with champions that rely on miss mechanic, which I do find quite interesting. For instance, Ghost. You're not going to be able to Ghost her super easily because she will just, hit you through phase with her medium. Basic attack. Photon's basic attacks, basic mediums cannot miss. Both champions' first medium attacks inflict 10% suppression debuff on opponent for 5 seconds. Max stacks 2. Wish it was a bit higher, but it's fine. And Photon's first and third light attacks inflict 450 energy vulnerability debuff for 10 seconds. Max stacks 10. It's not the biggest energy vulnerability, but you will be stacking these up a fair decent amount. Also, the first hit on either champion's heavy attack inflicts a non-stacking Sunder debuff on Photon's opponent for 15 seconds. If you do not know what Sunder does, it basically eliminates their crit resistance. It makes it 0, period. Right, so those are the debuffs that she primarily has access to, alongside a passive Petrify effect and a Taunt on level 2. Electromagnetic charges, again, we discussed this already. It's basically the CMM charges. And Photon, once you reach 25 charges, you enter your light damage mega power ranger mode. And Photon cannot gain any more than, unlike CMM. And these charges last 0.9 seconds. However, they are paused during opponent's special attacks and also for 3 seconds after the special attack, if you punish their special attacks. And this is going to be like a key thing for Photon, I think, especially with that level 2 rotation where you place Taunt on opponent, phase through their special attack, punish it, pause your charges, build up to, another special attack, and effectively kind of rinse and repeat, and will probably be able to remain in your Power Ranger mode for extended period of time. Those Furies are also quite potent, as we can see. 5 Furies, each giving you 1200 attack, so that would work out as over 6000 bonus attack right there just by entering your Power Ranger mode. Also, while in pure light form, Photon special attacks cannot be avoided using Dexterity Mastery. Now, that is going to be a problem. That is going to be a problem, especially considering her level 2 is unblockable then, and the final hit of level 1 is also unblockable unless you parry it. So there's going to be absolutely no choice. Everybody will have to learn how to parry that level 1 final hit. That's going to be a problem. And also, yeah, the fact that you cannot dex means that you'll have to take some of them on the block if you cannot get away from it quickly enough. Right. Special attack 1 also inflicts overload debuff. And again, unfortunately, that overload debuff only is a 10% one. This is something that I wish that it would be bigger, because overload debuff will be a fantastic way to increase her damage very rapidly. Now, it says it lasts for 8 seconds. However, all of her debuffs expire half as fast when she's in pure light form. So it can be like basically a 16-second debuff. And that will obviously just increase your base amounts of damage combined with the energy vulnerabilities. I do like seeing that. Wish the number was slightly higher potentially, but again, we don't really have a full idea of her damage output. And special attack 2, again, very simple, just inflicts taunt, and if you are in your pure light form, it will also let you enter phase, be untouchable for 3 seconds, which is the perfect combination. Putting taunt on opponent and then phasing through their special attack, which they will probably throw pretty much immediately, will also enable you to basically punish any and every special attack, and then pause your charges. Again, is, in my opinion, pretty much perfect. Now, special attack 3, max stacks of your charges get increased by 5 until end of the fight. This can occur 3 times. I think 99% of the fights, this special attack 3 is going to be kind of pointless, or at the very least, this ability is going to be pointless. I actually do like that. If at or above 20 charges, gain a non-stacking curse and that regeneration passive, healing 4k health over 8 seconds, and then you can pause this by striking the opponent, so you can regen a lot more. I like that ability for when you do need to regen and when something has gone very, very wrong. But I don't necessarily see Photon as a very long fight type of champion to begin with. So I do personally think that level 3 is going to be kind of unused for like 99% of the time. I don't see her doing Abyss type of fights better than many other science champions. And yeah, that region's nice in some longer quests possibly, or some challenge fights, but who knows. Now, signature ability, Photon's improved control over electromagnetic spectrum grants her immunity to all neutralize effects. That's good. Obviously, immune to neutralize, when awakened, will eliminate some of the mystics that could potentially deal with her well, namely Tigra, because Tigra could phase through her special attacks and could maybe be a very, nuky option for her, but if she's awakened, then you just cannot Tigra her. I do think this is the first neutralize immune champion, aside from those that are immune to ability accuracy, which is the reason why I don't think it's such a big deal that this champion is neutralize immune, because we effectively have Archangel and Mysterio and a few others who are basically neutralize immune. Now, for every debuff on the opponent, their block proficiency is reduced, and Photon's block proficiency is increased by half as much. This is an ability that will let you take less chip damage. When you are going to be using Photon on attack, it will effectively just let you take less chip damage. That's pretty much what it is. Now, when you're going to be fighting against Photon, this is going to be a very gnarly and nasty ability to deal with, because you are going to be taking a lot more block damage. So I think it's quite clever designed, with uses both offensively and defensively. I like that. Photon has a 65% chance to inflict one of her personal energy vulnerability debuffs on the opponent when struck or blocking a light attack. This is mainly going to be a defensive ability. It is going to, again, make it harder for some champions who rely on hitting her block, because you're going to be getting debuffs stacked on you that will, again, interact with inequity, will let her ramp up quicker, so on and so forth. So I do think that this is pretty much mainly a defensive ability. So overall, I would say that her awakened ability is useful, but is by no means mandatory. And I don't think that it will be mandatory to get her to max sig, more than likely. Kind of depends on how potent she's going to be as defender, because if she will have a lot of defensive value, then this will add a lot to it. But for offense, I don't think this matters that much. And that's pretty much Photon. When it comes to numbers, again, didn't see anything completely crazy off the wall. At the same time, it's always a bit misleading to base your damage impressions off a champion from deep dives, because those numbers always look somewhat different. But when it comes to the playstyle and stuff like that, I really like what I see. With that phasing after level 2, with the taunt, with the punish, with the overload debuffs, tons of debuffs on opponent in general. Yeah, I think she could be very, very cool. Not absolutely sold in terms of utility, because aside from Petrify and the bleed immunity, and that Petrify isn't super potent. There isn't that much happening in the utility department, because almost all of the debuffs are kind of themed towards dealing damage, like the energy vulnerability, like the overloads. Taunt is quite nice. I actually want to double check how potent is that taunt. How potent was that taunt debuff on that? It doesn't even specify. This is annoying. I would absolutely want to know how much attack does that taunt reduce. But I do have very positive impression of Photon overall. I, personally am more hopeful and interested in Photon based on what we know so far. Again, super early. Do not ever base any final conclusions of the champions based on deep dives and information, stuff like that. We always need to wait until these champions enter the game, until we have had the chance to use them, till we can see how many good and bad matchups they will have, how potentially troublesome they can be on defense, and how their damage output looks like, all that stuff. But I am genuinely quite excited for Photon. I do think she will be a very, very cool champion. And when it comes to synergies, she does have fairly solid synergies. Now, unblockable hits deal extra attack as burst of direct damage. It's not a lot of extra attack, I don't think. I don't think it's going to be anything too special. Also, considering this direct damage, so it will not interact with overload debuffs or energy vulnerability or anything like that. I don't think this is too great for Photon, but when counterattacking with her revolver, Elsa inflicts a slow passive for 3 seconds, and that also lets her bypass miss. I think is very solid for Elsa. I do like that ability. Wish it was longer, but I do think the fact that it's slow, that it can bypass miss, does make her more useful and will enable Elsa to be more aggressive and some trickier and heavier matchups. So the synergy for Elsa Bloodstone, I think it's very solid. The Marvel synergy, where punishing opponents' special attack with a heavy attack can let you pause your charges. That's always helpful. With Captain Marvel, gain 2 extra charges. That's not bad at all either. And for Kamal Khan, refresh up 3 personal buffs. It's Kamal Khan, nobody cares. Overall, I think it's solid synergy. It's fine. I don't think it's broken. I think it's just solid. Now, looking at the negative one, this is probably the most impactful for Mr. Negative, because when activating his personal evade, you inflict a 5-second non-stacking slow debuff with 8-second cooldown. That can have very high uptime overall, and I like that. And I think it's just cool to give Mr. Negative some more utility. Love that. And when it comes to Photon, reduce the potency of incoming degeneration effects by 20% for each unique personal debuff on the opponent. I think it's solid. You can have Taunt, Energy Vulnerability, Suppression, Sounder, so there's like 4 debuffs, and Overload 5, so you can get up to 100% degen reduction. And again, it is a very, I think, proper synergy. I don't think it's anything completely broken, but it can enable you to do fights you otherwise couldn't support. So that is Photon. And if my opinion about Vox has been going up and down based on, which bit of information became available, then looking at Photon overall, I'm kind of more hopeful. I'm kind of more interested. I think she's going to be very good. She does have kind of like most of the things that I dislike about CMM fixed in her kit with added stuff that I really do like about CMM. That kind of makes sense. And yeah, it's quite literally a science version, upgraded science version of Captain Marvel movie. And I look forward to having a go using this champion and seeing what she can do. I am quite hopeful. See you soon, guys. Bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information